So I, female 32, have been married to my husband, male 34, for 6 years. Before we got married, he had me sign a prenup, stating that our financials would always be separate, and the only thing we would share was an expense account to pay for household-related fees. The reason for this was because he was making pretty good money, and I was in graduate school, so my financial situation was pretty bad. But I signed nonetheless because I understood he wanted to protect himself. Anyway, fast forward to now. I've been out of school for about 4 years, and I make more than 3 times as much money as he does. I never asked how much he makes, and he's never asked me either. Anyway, 2 weeks ago, I told him that I was thinking about buying a new car, as the one I had was really old, since I had had it since my undergraduate days. He wasn't really interested, and just told me to get whatever I liked. So, a week ago, I decided to make the plunge and get an Audi. I was pretty excited, as I had always wanted one. At the time, my husband was on a business trip. He got back yesterday, and I showed him my car. He was really happy for me. However, later he asked me what my monthly payments were, as the Audi was pretty new. At this point, I told him that I had made the purchase in cash and that I had no monthly payments. He was taken aback and asked with what money, and I answered that I made more than enough money to be able to afford it. He didn't talk after that, and I thought that was that. However, after a few hours, he came to me and told me that he thinks that we should void the prenup. This is where I might be the a-hole. I laughed in his face and asked him why I would agree to do that, and his answer was that we're married and should share our financials. So I told him that we've been married for 6 years, and yet we've never shared financials, and I was fine with what we were doing. And his sudden change of heart was very suspicious. He called me a bunch of names and stormed out, and didn't come home, and I guess he told his family about our fight, and they called to berate me and say how he supported me while I was in school. He didn't. And now I'm wondering if I was the a-hole. Now the top comments. Not the a-hole. I would have laughed too. Now that it is no longer to his benefit, of course, he wants to void the prenup. Haven't you figured out what is his and he considers what is yours his? As long as his financials were protected, the prenup was fine. Now that he sees you as a cash cow, he wants to void the prenup. You have every right to be suspicious because reread what I wrote. By the way, it is none of his family's business. It always astounds me how the family gets involved when it is not their fight. And obviously, they don't have the full story. He did not support you while you were at school. It was nice while it lasted, but now that you're making so much more money, this marriage is over. 100% not the a-hole. Now that he knows you make enough money to pay cash for an Audi, he wants in on that action. No, don't do it. And don't let his family do it. He was perfectly happy with the financial situation prior to this. Suddenly, he's not, and he's calling you names, walking out on you, and getting his family involved, all because he find out you can buy a car with cash. Nope. What happened to his love? Update. I make $175 an hour and work between 40 to 48 hours a week. From what I know, he made about $90K when we got together, and I'm sure it's higher now. He also works less hours. We live in a state that is not expensive, so my monthly contribution is about $1,000 to $1,200 a month. He had some property in Nebraska, so he wanted to protect that, and I had debt from school. He did too, but mine was bigger. I knew his salary when we got together. However, he's since gotten promoted, and at first when I used to ask, he would make comments that it was rude of me to ask how much he made. So I stopped. He's never really been interested in my career or job, and we don't bring our work home. The reason I make 3 times what he makes, I made the assumption from what I knew his salary had been, is because I work as a CRNA, and he works as a software engineer. This post has really made me question everything in my life. I think I'm going to take a leave of absence from work to sort out my life. My husband was only my second relationship, and I guess I was too caught up in school, work, and debt to really see that my marriage was a sham. I'm not blameless, which is hard to swallow. So I'm going to have a conversation with my husband and see where we go from here, if anywhere. My family used to like my wife when we first started dating, but they started antagonizing her once I proposed. All of my siblings and my mother are very insulting towards her. My dad doesn't care and stays neutral on the matter. My mom had made my wife cry on the day of our wedding because she called her on the morning of that she should watch out and never hurt me because I'm her baby boy and she won't let any female hurt me. She also told my wife that she must be happy she's taking me away. I told my mom off for her behavior and told her I won't accept that anymore, and if she repeats it, I'll go no contact. Which I obviously shouldn't say because going no contact with family is harder than it sounds. My mom apologized to my wife after the wedding and said she'd try to make it up. I saw my mom genuinely trying, but my wife wasn't interested in making up with my mom. Completely and simply said she'd have a typical relationship to my family out of respect for me and the fact they're my parents and siblings. Few months after, whenever I made plans with my wife, my mom, my two brothers, and my sister would always complain to me about said plans and try to get me to cancel them. Those plans would include trying to have a baby, young on vacation, getting a pet, and so on. Never heard any of that, of course, and made my own choices with my wife. My siblings have told me that they started despising my wife and how she has a negative impact on me because she stole me from my family. I texted my siblings in the group chat that we have that I want to be left alone, and that resulted in my sister and one brother calling me and cursing me out for making mom sad for my wife. My wife heard all of that. She said she doesn't feel comfortable around my family anymore, and she wanted to skip all Christmas plans we had with them. I told her we can't do that and that they're my family after all. She finally gave in and came to all our Christmas plans. After every family gathering, my wife would be either mad or in tears because of how my siblings and mom would either ignore her or speak to her in a passive-aggressive way. After the New Year's Eve party we had with my family, we went home and she broke down in tears, saying she can't keep doing this anymore and that it's my fault for forcing her to come around these people when they treat her like that. This past week we've not talked much because my wife has been going through it. But I'm thinking and wondering if I'm really the a-hole here for insisting she spends time with my family. Now the top comments. You're the a-hole, and don't act surprised when your wife drops divorce papers on the table. What your mother did on your wedding day was absolutely disgraceful, and you should count your stars she went through with the wedding because and I'm sure many other women, wouldn't have. You should show your wife you're thankful for her making the effort over Christmas to spend time with people who make her life a misery. You're basically telling and showing your wife that your family comes before her, no matter how much they abuse her. Absolutely the a-hole. Your wife is your family, first and foremost. You clearly recognize the abuse your parents and siblings are laying on your wife, yet you are doing zilch to truly protect her. You absolutely can choose not to celebrate Christmas and other holidays with these toxic extended family members. You claim you are doing your best to protect her. You are not. You are enabling them. You may call them out initially, but you continue to just show up. And worse, force your wife to also. And you allow them to keep being abusive without ever enforcing any true boundaries or consequences for their toxic actions. At this point, your words mean nothing, because you never support them with your actions. I, 34 male, came from a relatively small traditional Hispanic family. I have two older siblings. My dad died when I was a teenager, and my mom is elderly and sick. My oldest brother, 51 years old, has a mental disorder. He can eat and care for himself physically, but cannot work or refuses to, and cannot be left unsupervised. He was not born this way, but rather developed it in his early 20s. I was never close to him growing up. I felt he used his condition to his advantage and to gain sympathy from everyone. I had a feeling my dad felt the same way. They used to fight a lot about my brother being lazy and not pulling his fair share, even before he developed the condition. I have always blamed my brother for causing unnecessary stress to my dad while he was battling cancer up to his eventual death. After he died, I got a part-time job to help the family while going to high school. Meanwhile, my brother has never held a job in his life. I have made it clear to both my mother and sister that I refuse to be his caretaker when my mom passes. I have offered to provide some help financially, but I do not want him in my house for the rest of his life, or mine. I feel no emotional attachment to him. In fact, dare I say, he feels like a stranger to me. My mom almost died last year and spent several months in a rehab facility. During this time, since I was working remote due to COVID, he came to stay with me. My sister rarely helped with him. Even when I had to have surgery, she only took him for one weekend and brought him back. She thinks that because I'm the man and my wife and I have no children, I must assume that responsibility. Anytime I bring it up, she says, as part of this family, I cannot just walk away from the responsibility, as despite everything, he is our brother. My wife was happy to help last year, but did state she would not be okay with this being a permanent arrangement. Frankly, I can't say I blame her for that. Ultimately, I feel it is my mother's responsibility to make future arrangements for her son's well-being, and not just assume we will handle it. I have sat down with her and offered to pay for legal fees or whatever is needed, as long as she makes the arrangement. Months have gone by and she just sweeps the topic under the rug. Even if my sister offered to split the caretaking duties and time, I just don't want any part of it at all. They both think with time I will come around, but I am not. Now the top comments. Not the a-hole, but you are playing a dangerous game of chicken because you will not budge, and they assume you will when the time comes. You know there is a problem, so in order to not be an a-hole, you really need to tell the family, including brother if he is mentally able enough, in no uncertain terms that you will not be taking over the caring duties. You will be called all sorts of things, but better that everyone is on the same page now than later when everyone is grieving and in need. Not the a-hole, but I'd consult a lawyer now. Consider that there is always the chance that he will outlive you all, and the goal should be to make long-term arrangements for him that are not dependent on a specific person. Is he on disability? Does he have a conservatorship? It's harder to get some of these arrangements in place than you'd think, so start now. So, just for some background context, my boyfriend, 23, and I, 20, recently moved into a new apartment back in December. I was very hesitant to move in with him, as I'm a full-time college student, unemployed, and wasn't ready for the commitments of moving into my own place. His mother was putting him out, so it was mandatory for him to move. But not for me, as I lived with my father, expense-free. I relented eventually, as our original agreement was that I'd pay 40 out of 60. Then it somehow changed to 50-50. Just to note, I also solely pay for groceries and small things that are needed, utensils, dishes, paper towels, etc. Cook for the both of us, and clean nearly every day. I don't work, as I am a university student who has been fortunate enough to get help with my tuition from family, and an old car accident settlement I received once I turned 18. All the money I have, it's from saving extra money, or when I would work during summer break. My boyfriend works as a parking garage tenant, where he sits in the office, answering calls every now and then, for $16 an hour, 5 days a week. January rent was just due on the 1st, and when I asked him about his half, he asked that I pay the entirety, $1,200, and he'll pay me his half once he goes to the bank. I reluctantly agreed, as that wasn't our original agreement. Fast forward to a week after paying rent. I ask him about his half, and he gets defensive, claiming that we both live here and that I'll get my money, and that he'll pay me my money and I won't have to pay anything ever again. He seemed genuinely infuriated and annoyed that I asked him about what was going on with the rent situation. I asked him calmly if he actually had it, as I figured he may not have the money. But he insisted he does, and that he just needed to get it out of the bank. I've never been one to press people about money, but my boyfriend has a history of borrowing money and not paying it back. Prior to his rent, he asked to borrow $600 back in September of last year, and still has yet to pay it back. I'm starting to have issues with the fact that he hasn't made any effort to actually pay me my money. It's more so the principle than the actual money itself. However, according to him, I'm being an a-hole about it, because if I really believed in us, I would trust that he will eventually pay me back. Again, I'm sure he will, but his lack of drive to do it is what bothers me. Am I the a-hole for wanting my money back? Now the top comments. OP, you're young. Take this as a lesson learned and move back in with your father. Ask for his help if you need extra money to break the lease. No 23-year-old needs to go to a bank for money. Money is accessible through a phone or laptop, which I assume he has. He's either broke and not telling you, or is just trying to manipulate you into paying so he doesn't have to. It's irrelevant either way. He's dishonest and needs consequences. Tell him you're going back to your father, not the a-hole. Let me see if I have this straight. You're paying 50% of the bills and paying for 100% of the groceries and household needs, so you're already paying more than him. Plus, you're doing all the cooking and cleaning, so you're also contributing more than him. Now he's going to have you pay all the rent when you're already paying more and doing everything to run this place? This is on top of being a university student, and he doesn't get why you're not okay with all of this? Please understand that this situation will not improve, only spiral, not the a-hole.